There we go. All right. And Victor, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go ahead and start up.
All right. My name is Victor Konn. I work with Gene and Joe and Max over at Steampunk. I'm spread across two different teams. I work with Gene on the Sec DevOps team, and also the VET team, which is the vulnerability elimination team. It's an initiative that ICE put forward to help remediate system vulnerabilities that may be lingering. My background, I've been in IT for a couple years now. I started in 2019. I came over from a structural engineering background, decided to make a career switch a couple years in. So very happy I did. I love this work. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, thank you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to ask a couple questions to get Victor talking about some of the work he does on the VET, the vulnerability elimination team, and talk about some of the challenges he's run into. Although I do, like he said, I do work with them on the DevSecOps team, but I'm not on the VET and don't know a whole lot about it other than the fact that, you remediate vulnerabilities. So why don't you, Victor, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about what your team does and what the goal of the team is?
So in most enterprises, as anyone who works in software knows, there's vulnerabilities and security issues related to software development. And prior to DevOps, security was kind of towards the tail end of the development cycle, life cycle. And so the VET team kind of serves as kind of the bridge, or as almost kind of like glue to fix these existing vulnerabilities while our Sec DevOps team works on developing the pipeline framework to move security farther to the left. And so the way we get our work is we reach out, and also other system teams reach out to us about vulnerabilities and issues that they have within their applications, and we're kind of like subject matter experts to help them resolve issues that they kind of have them stumped. It's pretty much.
So do you guys tend to be reactive in that they're coming to you saying, hey, we need help? Or do you tend to be more proactive in, saying, hey, we see these reports that you guys have problems. Let's help you through the first couple and get you going on your own to get the practice moving?
The VET team kind of functions more reactively. The proactive work is more the pipeline work we're trying to do, trying to put it in place. But it is proactive in that we do reach out to their security, their ISOs, and basically let them know that we are a technical asset for them if they have any issues. Or sometimes system teams have quite a wide degree of skill, and some find some vulnerabilities very difficult to handle and manage. So we kind of step in that sort of role. We also take care of some more complicated vulnerabilities that require kind of in-depth looks in the application.
Which ones do you like handling more as part of the team? Do you prefer doing the hey, this is a tough one, let's get our heads together and try to figure it out, or you kind of like the let's teach them how to fix these easy ones?
Definitely the former. I like teamwork. Anytime I can get in a group and get our heads together, it may not be me with the solution, but I can come up with some thoughts and maybe spark someone with the solution, and that's kind of what it's all about. I feel like, I definitely enjoy the more complicated issues. The easy ones are actually kind of frustrating because a lot of times I already know the answer, and it's something that's easily find. You can find it easily online, essentially. But yeah.
And it is a lot of the issues that the teams just aren't security oriented at all, so they don't even know what they're looking for. They're just
sometimes.
So
Yeah.
how do you get the so they come to you, they say, "Here, we got this list of vulnerabilities." Are they showing you, "Hey, here's the last vulnerability report we got from whatever tool the I guess in this case the SOC is running or whatever scan tool is finding," and they're saying, "Can you help us solve all of these?" Or they're usually coming with ones and twos of these are the ones we think we need fixed now.
We typically, I mean, it's by severity. So the criticals and highs are obviously high priority. Um, and I actually haven't, the lows, yeah, we hit the lows and mediums, but the main focus is the critical 0 days, criticals and highs, and also mediums.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, anybody, if you guys have questions, feel free to jump in. Rich is willing to take them. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges? Like what's the problem with, I know you mentioned at one point that, sometimes it's not just as simple as let's just upgrade everything, or let's not just replace these libraries, which even though that might be the remediation that most people would want you to take.
I guess the most challenging parts is, I think it's more of a culture thing, since, I joined IT after DevOps. So my whole mindset is, I don't know what the industry was like pre-DevOps. And all I know is that I see the systems that were created pre-DevOps and, waterfall, and I can see how difficult it is for some to kind of embrace this type of DevOps methodologies. And so we're dealing with, a lot of times more stale systems that don't have enough feedback loops. Security is kind of viewed at the end. So that's the most challenging part, because that's kind of out of my control. I'm here to just help with the vulnerabilities, and sometimes it can feel like you're on a hamster wheel, because you fix one and then the next month's scan, you get another one. So it's kind of the vet is more of like a immediate solutions now, while we work on moving the culture of the organization.
What would you say if you had kind of your druthers? What would you say the biggest thing that the teams need to learn to do to start getting ahead of it, rather than just being completely reactive and having to come to the vet for help?
I mean, in our organization, a lot of it is stale architecture that just I don't know if it was planned, to keep the architecture up to date. So if it was working, they don't want to touch it; they want to leave it. And so
Cattle, not pets.
Yeah, really. Yeah,
How many times
that's
a day do
really
we
the
say
crux
that?
of it. That is the crux of it. So, yeah, that's definitely it.
So what types of technologies and languages do you guys work on?
As in, what are the application languages, or?
Yeah. I mean, or what do you have to deal with? Is you dealing with a lot of source code, or if you're talking about stale architecture, you're talking about doing a lot more system admin stuff? And
Yeah, a lot of it's system admin focus. A lot of it maybe web server configurations that have certain HTTP vulnerabilities. A lot of certificate type things. The encryption levels have changed over the years. Some are on TLS 1 and they just never moved TLS 2 and higher, disabling ciphers, some self-signed certificates that kind of just were put in place automatically, and it works.
Just for a minute. No, we'll get rid of this before we go live, right?
Yeah, exactly. So they test it and then just roll it out that way. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody out there have any questions?
What are the problems you have with the teams taking your suggestions and taking your changes?
Some teams are really, really grateful for our help. There's a kind of a spectrum. Some teams, I don't know if it's an ego thing. I'm not really sure. I kind of need to handle the situations kind of delicately. You know, I don't want to. I'm here to help. I don't want to, you know, make someone feel less than, or you know, I'm just here to help resolve issues. So a lot of people appreciate the efforts. Some are more difficult to work with, and sometimes I need to work with, you know, their ISO. They're just different personalities.
How far from getting guess universal buy-in? I guess how much how much of it is carrot, how much of it is stick with this? Are most of these teams that are coming to you there because they've been told they have to get this fixed or else, or are they trying to get ahead of their problems, just routine maintenance, or what?
I mean, they know they have to fix these vulnerabilities. But I think a lot of them are also overwhelmed, because I was actually on some of these system teams, and the way we would be provided these vulnerabilities, it was almost like the floodgates open and you're just drowned. So you know, our team, we're still trying to what's the word? We're still trying to go through the introductions and create an environment where they're comfortable reaching out, and it's still in works. We just started this team in the last quarter of last year, and so we're still reaching out to the ISOs and continually asking them to reach out early, and you know, and don't hesitate to reach out if they have any issues resolving any of these things, because it can be overwhelming as we try to move to
in your
DevOps.
organization. What are the consequences of non-compliance?
They remove their authority to operate, so they pretty much shut them down.
Have you actually seen them do that?
No, can't say I have.
So
yet.
what are the real consequences of non-compliance?
That might be above my pay grade. I mean, there's all types of cyber attacks occurring, especially government organizations. So the risks are there, right? I think everyone knows that. So there's definitely a big emphasis on it.
I believe all that.
Yeah, I haven't seen the you know, ATO removals yet, but hopefully they don't get there.
How many, is there a lot of protection for them outside of it, like WAFs and web application firewalls, or just the network security, so that they're not, ultimately they think they're okay for a while? Whether or not that's true, we'll see over time. But
yeah, I mean, no, there's an entire network team that's on the DHS level that manages kind of the external internet access to some of the public facing applications. And I actually don't have, I'm not privy to kind of their like how they're handling the security aspects. My role is more application focused. So, I mean, we're definitely not, you know, the frontline security. At least we're behind quite a few firewalls. Mm-hmm. So many that they don't even they don't share any of that information. So,
well, that's why you're attacked.
Yeah.
Right. We're pretty good at network security now. So the attack vectors have moved to the applications where we're not good at that at all.
Right. Well, and things like the supply chain, right? Which that's the SolarWinds, where they said, hey, no reason to try to fight through the firewall. Let's just ask somebody to bring us in on their own.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, I mean, if you look at most of the attacks that succeed, they're third-party dependencies.
Yeah, actually, those are a lot of vulnerabilities we see as well.
Yeah, Well, I mean, but you've got people who are building SQL injection vulnerabilities right now today. There's someone checking it in right now into that application.
Yep. Yeah. All for a quick fix. Just
Yeah.
that's all right. We could just concatenate these two strings together before I send it to the SQL Server.
Yeah, we haven't known about those for 50 years now. We don't have tools that will pick them up immediately.
Yes. Yeah, static analysis tools that you can run in seconds on every code base without almost any effort whatsoever, and it'll tell you, hey, that's a SQL injection.
Yeah. No, that doesn't exist. If only we could know SQL injection when it happened.
Hey, how about this, Victor? So you're on a team that's there to advise and help remediate, right? And I think a lot of people are in enterprises where security people or people that know application security at least are in very short supply, don't have a whole lot of time to dictate or to dedicate to any individual team, right? So I think a lot of organizations, if they're going to try to make a play at taking security seriously, which I think, in my experience at least, most organizations are willing to say they're willing to do, but they're not always willing to do. So do you think this is a good solution, a good temporary solution, long-term solution? A team of experts? How do you think it's working out?
I definitely don't think it's a long-term solution. You have to move to infrastructure as code. You need to move, leverage more DevOps methodologies. So if you're trying to set up a team that's just going to fix these vulnerabilities, you're in a lot of trouble because it's always going to be a reactive process, and you never get out of it. You're going to be continually, there's always new vulnerabilities coming out. So it's going to be just an endless flood. If you can move it farther back and, farther to the left within the development pipelines, I mean, this is really, that'll change everything.
So how much,
so important.
How much work do y'all do fixing and remediating versus championing and teaching?
Teaching the vulnerability fixes or teaching the DevOps methodologies and why it's so important to move security to the left?
Well, I'd ask both. Yeah, they're both good questions.
Not too much time teaching how to fix the vulnerabilities, although we're not hands-on. We do provide them with solutions and suggestions. So I guess in a way, like I do provide, I essentially lay out the steps on how to fix these vulnerabilities. So I guess I am teaching them how to fix it or giving them the blueprint. But
well, I guess the test for that is, are they coming back over and over with the same ones, or when you show each team once, do they tend to, not hit you up for that same type of vulnerability until it's a little bit more complicated or it's a different variant or something like that?
They're able to typically resolve it once we provide them with the path and how to, they can kind of figure it out. I think a lot of times, maybe they didn't have the resources to figure it out, or maybe they're too overwhelmed with other duties as a system admin,
One of the things I've seen in a number of different places is that, like I said, security tends to be treated as a checklist item that gets done at the end until you get to a true DevSecOps pipeline. There's never any time to do any real remediation, and the impression is often that the development teams don't care because they just want to get that checkbox that I ran the security scan and let me go live. But what I found in a lot of places that have actually tried and had some success in bringing security further to the left is that if you can get the list of vulnerabilities in front of the developers and give them some way of figuring out how to move forward, whether it's as somebody around, like, a team like the vet that can say, here's how to approach it, or even just sometimes good documentation. Some of the tools will have you click on the problem, it says, this is what a good looks like, this is what bad looks like, here's how, here's what you're trying to do to fix it. That developers like to knock them off, right? A lot of times they're easy. Switching over from concatenating strings to to using prepared statements in most languages for SQL injection prevention is really easy, and it's something teams can knock off a whole bunch and make that list of vulnerabilities shorter. And I think the impression is that the developers don't care, but the reality is they just get the information so late that there's other things on their mind. If you can get them the information earlier and give them the tools to start working on fixing it, that they actually are pretty good at being proactive about it. My last contractor, we actually found that they step one of rolling out some new security tools was to make them aware that the reports are being run and show them the results to the development teams right up front. And stage two was going to be to start getting them to address the criticals and high. And long before we got to stage two, most of the teams had already cleared off all the criticals and were well down on the highs, not because they were told they had to, but because all of a sudden these messages popped up in their Jenkins reports and stuff, and they were like, "Hey, well, that's easy. I can fix that. Yeah, if I only I had known that was what I was trying to do. It only took me a few minutes to figure it out." So,
yeah, it's, no one wants to make code that's full of vulnerabilities. If you can get the knowledge to them earlier, it's definitely easier to fix. And also, a lot of times, a lot of it was also the infrastructure. If you can have pipelines configured to where when you don't have to patch anymore, you're just deploying new infrastructure and rolling those out. You don't have to worry about having the latest patches because what you're deploying is patched.
So I guess Tom, you had a couple parts to your question. That was the first part. What was the next part to the question that I interrupted?
I forgot. What do you know, Victor? Do you know what your ratios are? How many of your type of people to developer at the organization?
Significantly more developers.
Yeah, but is it like 1 to 200, 500?
The team pretty much just started, so it's, and I guess, so we are working on getting our scanning earlier in the pipeline. We're still establishing that framework. So I guess the better comparison would be like how many of us compared to system admins, and it's probably 1 to 100, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think that's too unusual. I don't think that's.
Yeah. And that's going to mean your ratios to developers, it could be up to 1 in 1,000.
Yeah.
Which is, you guys doing all the work isn't going to work for you.
Yeah.
You have to teach people how to do the work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or not. I mean, if you want job security, don't teach them anything.
Well, as Victor was mentioning, a big part of what we've been doing on his other team, which is, that we work on together, is trying to get the DevSecOps pipeline, and really a lot of that has been. We joked about it a little bit ago. Is cattle not pets? You get people under the understanding that, hey, if we can get your infrastructure as code working so that you can deploy over and over, then you don't have to be afraid to just go to the latest, newest image, right? You can lay it back down on a new box and everything's cleaner and safer, and you've patched a lot, and we can do the testing all the way through, and it doesn't have to be a big scary thing. Whereas most people are, we deployed this 6 years ago and it's running, and don't mess with it. Don't upgrade. Don't touch it. In fact, don't even look at it. It's just, I'm not confident it's going to survive any inspection.
I tend to think without culture change, the old adage of if you make it foolproof, they'll build a better fool tends to apply.
Yeah, I think culture is the biggest by far. I'm an engineer by trade, so my mindset has been improving processes, how to make it better, more efficient. So it's kind of natural to me, but I understand, especially the way that, IT was for many years before DevOps even existed. That concept didn't exist in that, construct. So, yeah.
Well, I don't know that that's true, but I certainly understand why you view it as true.
It was treated
Well,
as if it
I
didn't
wasn't
exist.
around then. I wasn't around then, so.
I think he just called you old, Tom.
Yeah,
Oh well. Oh,
that's
well.
okay. So my daughter tells me that all the time. I am a grumpy old man.
I don't seem too grumpy.
Give him a chance.
Yeah, this is a friendly conversation.
So you said one of the things you mentioned earlier was really it's getting the culture change. What if you had a suggestion for, hey, we want to try to get something like this started and I want to try to make it effective, and we're in the enterprise, we're woefully outnumbered, like you said you are. What do you have any good suggestions for making something like this work and for trying to get, what do you tackle first? How do you try to get people to change that culture?
I think what we're doing now, just trying to set the blueprint and the framework and then move from there. I mean, and also, people need to be open to learn about this, culture shift, because without that, all you're going to get is resistance, and so I definitely think people can embrace that culture, but that's up to the individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe as an organization, focus on having people who are looking to move in that direction.
So
I work with. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say I work with Gene and Vic on that program, and I think what there's a little bit too much of is finger pointing and shifting and causing blame, and I think that's kind of inherent in the culture where everybody sees the security organization as kind of bad guys or people they don't want to deal with. And I think if it's, one of those almost amnesties, right? I know I have issues and I'll tell you if you don't slap my hands type thing. Would go and improve things. And kind of to tag on what Vic was just saying, ICE is set up in as you guys know, in a pretty stovepipe, but also pretty familiar pattern of, you've got your solutions delivery, your app developers, you got your ops guys, and you got your security guys, right? And there's huge communication walls that are up between those orgs. And so I think the work you're doing, Gene, that cuts horizontally across those verticals to create a kind of a holistic view of how to do application development, application management, I think will go a long way. So.
Yeah, I will say that, I've worked on a number of different teams where this has been part of what we've been doing. Tom, I know, has worked on a bunch of these where they were trying to do this, just to improve security and make it a first-class citizen, along with quality or testing or whatever. The one thing that I think had an advantage on this particular organization is that we're coming from the security team. It's the security team that's pushing this. So a lot of times we run up against the security team saying, yeah, that sounds great, but that's not the way we do things. So, we're not going to let you go ahead and change that process or whatever. In this case, they're behind it. So you have a little bit more weight. The other thing is that, at least in my opinion, and Joe, maybe your opinion is a little bit different on this, but it seems like they've taken the approach from security as, hey, we've got some ideas to help you. Are these things that will help your organization, your the different silos? Is this stuff that will help the SOC? Is this stuff that will help, networking? Is this stuff that will help the development teams? And just like so many things, people, I think, tend to react better to, we're actually, giving you trying to offer help rather than trying to shove it down your throat and saying, thou shalt use this new tool, thou shalt use this new process, because we've said that this is the way forward. So
yeah,
it seems like it has better attention.
Yeah, and kind of to go back to, I think, a point that Tom made is that right now it's almost all carrot, not stick, at least at the moment. And so one of the things I think your team, Gene, is doing is looking and evaluating at tools that are, more effective or more meaningful to development teams, let's say, right? Vic illuminated me about a month or two ago saying, yeah, there's Web Inspect and they run this, but it produces a 1,000-page report. Like, no one's going to read that. So they just run it, toss it aside, and check a box that they ran it. And it's like, okay, well, maybe there's a better way to configure that tool to kind of maybe reduce the verbose are like, oh, maybe you shouldn't have 300 pages of warnings in this tool, right? So, I mean, it's almost an education of like, are your tools configured correctly, and are there better ones out there that you should be using? So,
Yeah,
I wanted to.
we've seen that actually with not just even security tools. A project that Tom and I worked on a number of years ago that had static analysis, trying to get people to pay attention to the static analysis findings and code quality findings.
Yeah.
And we had a couple people that were great champions of it and really focused on, let's try to get rid of the extra stuff. If it's not, the minors, the info findings, if you're not actually going to tell people they have to fix this, let's take them off the report. Much better to have them see 20 items than to see 200 when you only care about 20, because they're much more likely to fix it. And then, when that 20 is down to 2 or 3, well, then we can talk about making it 30 and 40 again, and people would be maybe more receptive to fixing it. But if that 30-page report or 100-page report or whatever, just too daunting, nobody's going to want to do anything with it.
No, definitely agree. I tried to jump in earlier, Tom, to one of your questions about what's the consequence. And I agree with Vic, there's no real consequence except when the CIO's FISMA scorecard turns a little bit too red because of system X, then all of a sudden that system has all the time in the world to go fix things magically. So that's the consequences if you get on the big dog's radar. That's a consequence you don't want to have to deal with, I guess.
Well, you don't want to have to deal with, but the people who are deciding what you work on may be A-okay with it, because they'll pressure you to fix it real quickly to get off the radar, and then they'll have their other agenda serviced the rest of the time.
Yeah, the only downside I see with that is that you're at a higher level, and I think it is better at least that somebody's pushing, saying, hey, these actually do need to get fixed, rather than just leaving it up to people who aren't trying to be proactive about it or trying to get to that point. Though, is that it does become about the scorecard in that case. Again, it's about checking a box. It's not, is this secure? It's not really looking at the risks. I'm sure a month ago or whatever it was, that every team's first priority was to get rid of SolarWinds Orion out of their network, get it all turned off, right? Not a matter of, was there other bigger problems? Were there other? It was just that has to be drop everything and fix it, which is probably the right choice. But things like that come up all the time where, it's something that on our particular instance may or may not be a real critical finding, may not really be something that's exploitable, may not be something that's a big deal, but you're always driven just by, this is the scorecard and I want it to remain green, or I want to get it to green, so you have to do this now. And I don't know, it just strikes me that that's a little bit of the same problem you have with the other type, fixing any type of thing where it's not reasoned out, it's not taking other factors into account.
Yeah, no, definitely agree.
I think in most transformations, one of the things that people forget are changing the incentive system. If you don't change how people are viewed, rewarded, punished, then you're not going to really change the culture. And if you can't change the culture and the incentive system, you're not going to change behaviors.
So for something like this, Tom, do you think there's a good incentive system for fix it just so that we don't get a red scorecard? I mean, that doesn't seem like that's going to affect too many people, other than that's kind of the office space, right? I want to do just a good enough job so I don't get fired, just don't have my bosses yelling at me.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think from the how do you make people who don't know much about security care about security enough to make it a priority? If I knew a good answer to that, I wouldn't be here. So I think it's a tough one, but that's what your challenge is how do you make people actually care about security?
Mm-hmm.
And if you actually revoked the authority to operate, then all of a sudden some high level people would become really concerned. Now, they'd be concerned long enough to get that back, and then their other incentives would bubble back up and be what they'd be really concerned about. And if you make them concerned about you too much, they're going to do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's a, true change is a hard problem. And that's why true change is something that we don't often see.
Yeah. Well, and you've said before that, you think the biggest or the point where many transformations fail is when somebody says, I'm not going to change.
Yeah. And when that's acceptable, then the transformation's failed.
Yeah,
and I mean, DevSecOps is 100% a transformation.
I've got a question maybe for the group. One thing we've heard a little bit, and I've heard before, especially in law enforcement organizations, is you'll see developers that are working on, the hottest application that really supports the coolest mission. And they kind of say, I don't care because, the guy that I support with the gun is never going to allow the system to turn off. That's my customer. I could care less what OCIO thinks of what I'm doing, as long as I keep the law enforcement officer happy and productive. How do you combat something like that?
And you're saying law enforcement because it's a critical resource. It's a,
Yeah, you could, name your, switch that.
Could be a hospital system or,
Sure.
or something else, but anything that's kind of life or death has the gravitas behind it to stay turned on no matter what.
Right.
Well, that's a good question. And I mean, if there were easy answers, someone would have done it. But yeah, I mean, if it's, we accept this risk and try to deal with it, or we turn off this system that can't be turned off, it's not going to get turned off. But what the industry's become is that there's always, I've been on both sides of the fight of, you aren't secure enough and we're going to turn your system off. And it always starts with the security people saying, unless you fix these problems, you can't proceed. And the people delivering the product say, we'll see what my VP has to say about it. And then there's some negotiation at a higher level and you end up fielding the system anyway. And the VP hopes that nothing bad happens, and everybody hopes nothing bad happens, but some of the higher level security people at some level secretly hope something happens to show them that they should have been concerned.
Yes, and they're right most of the time. Nothing does happen most of the time.
Nothing that we find out about.
Right. So.
Right. I mean, these systems have a lot of users, and
well,
who knows?
I mean, that's the idea behind risk management, is you don't know and you're making hopefully educated decisions of saying, hey, this is a huge risk, but not putting it out there is a larger risk or a larger detriment to us. I mean, that's.
Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think it's the same argument with a lot of don't scan at the end for security problems or performance problems or whatever, is that you have to make that case right at the end to say there's a chance something could go wrong. So we should probably fix the security problem, or we can go live today and we know that brings revenue or, happier customers today for the chance that something goes wrong, versus the chance of something, security problem in the future. And business people almost always will take the sure thing of, revenue now.
Well, I think a lot of it is I think the real innovation of DevSecOps is shifting left. And it's the ability to do something about your security problems before the end. Because if you wait until the end, you are 100% going to negotiate security problems into production. There's no way around it. It's going to happen. Of any system with any significance, they will exist, and you will have to put security problems, security defects into production. So that's what you're really trying to do. The innovation and the change you're trying to have with DevSecOps is, let's not automatically have to negotiate security defects into production. let's try to address those before we get there. And you have to do that through education. You have to do that through finding the problems and remediating them before you put them into production. And the traditional way of security and performance are at the end means that you're going to have problems with both of those for a long time to come.
Well, the book Perfect Software has a whole section on testing, which pretty much covers if you're going to test and no one's going to do anything about it, there's no point in running that test, which is kind of like the same idea of, sure, we can perform these security scans now, but you're going to release anyways. So why am I doing anything? Like, why am I wasting my time?
Well, unfortunately, the answer more often than not is because that's a checkbox we have to have. Right. But your point is valid. If you're going to do something and not do anything with the results, there's no value in doing it.
Yeah, I'd say when you look at it from a value stream mapping perspective, it's actually worse because you're doing nothing with the results, but you're spending more time before you even release into production. Maybe we'll just push into production and spend that time actually trying to write better software and fix the problems in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. What the argument is that the rules say we have to do X. That becomes a checkbox item. So the time we spend doing X, the value of that is that we move to the next state, whether that's a higher environment or production or filling out that checkbox. But you're right, in the end, it's not making the product better. It's just allowing you to advance the product.
Yeah, I actually think there's some value. I wouldn't have thought it, a couple of years back, but some value in having some of the automatic issues raised, like a scan or tests or whatever. When you have failing tests or failing scans or vulnerabilities that are found, automatically opening a ticket in the backlog. I don't think doing it in a separate system, having the raising a customer service issue or remedy ticket or something like that usually works. But if it's a Jira ticket that says, "Hey, we found this," at least it kind of, I think, gives you the sense of the amount of technical debt that's building up, the number of problems. The backlog starts getting longer with a lot of things that are tagged security, and again, I seems to me that most of the developers I've worked with tend to want to make things better, as long as they don't have to jump through too many hoops, and as long as they're not going to get smacked down for spending time doing something they weren't told they had to do. So putting in the backlog, making it visible to them, the shift left, and having it, feedback gives them the opportunity to act on it. So it's not right at the end. It gets to Tom's point. It's not at the end where you're starting to negotiate. Do we fix this or do we go live? Because we know that at some point that always is we go live. But it doesn't seem it's that way when it happens during the development sprint, as opposed to during the release cycle. At least I think so. Victor?
Well, ultimately, your goal with DevSecOps is that there's no difference between a release cycle and your development work, whether you call it a sprint or anything else.
Yeah. So also like doing it at the end, it seems like a lot of the issues can compound, which maybe magnify them. So moving it left is maybe smaller bites.
Yeah.
And which is, from your perspective, it seems more manageable, versus you dump a whole bunch of security stuff at the end. People are like, no thanks.
Yeah, it's the 300-page report, right?
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
More than once, I have run Fortify on an established code base, and nobody wants to see the results of that.
Yeah.
Sean?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
A few years of development on a typical code base, and then you run a security tool. You've got months of remediation.
Yeah. It's just bad news. You're not going to have time to deal with.
Yeah.
And that's never the fun part.
Yeah.
No, it's never the fun part.
Right.
Sean, anything from you? Is it different for desktop or?
Well, yeah, I mean, we didn't have DevOps, DevSecOps as a thing. I mean, we started our company in '97, and we bootstrapped everything. We got, I don't know, about 10, maybe we'll say 8 years ago, we set up our so first off, our product gets installed by the user. It's not pushed to the user. They download it when an update is available and whatnot like that. But yeah, about eight years ago, we created our own kind of pipeline where we had daily builds, daily testing. Everything was automated. Email gets sent to all the developers and showing the test results and whatnot. A web application is completely different. I mean, there's some common concepts there that are in common, but the notion of pushing to production I guess we have a higher bar because we don't want to push to production. We don't want to have a daily push to production, right? Our production requires someone to go out and download it and interrupt their workflow. So we were on a six to 8 week cycle. We would have updates 6 to 8 weeks. It's a small enough update that it's not that interruptive, but we don't want a daily or even multiple times a day. I hear of in some of these meetups that I go to, I hear how you can push a change 4 times a day, and it's different mindset altogether. So no, it's been interesting though listening in.
Well, it's interesting too. I mean, even desktop software that gets automatically updated, where it's all behind the scenes, like Chrome or Firefox
Right.
or something like that. They started with the idea that they could push these out at any time, and they're pretty solid. Once a month, they do it. No, and theoretically, all that you need to do is
good, but
quit.
You wouldn't tolerate Chrome being updated every day.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, when I see Firefox get updated, I'm like, all the tabs come back, but I don't want to see that happen more than once.
Yeah, right. You wouldn't want it to
really.
Yeah, you wouldn't want it to happen multiple times a day for sure.
Yeah.
Eric, anything to add?
No, not really.
How about you, Lisa? You joined late.
Not much for me. I feel like I haven't really worked past couple of years on like big enterprise places, so it's like DevSecOps isn't even like on the radar. It's like it's great if we have DevOps and like a automated CI/CD pipeline.
And do you think it's that they don't care about the security? They have too many bigger things to worry about, or they're just too small to even try to attack it? It's too big a chunk to bite off.
I think it's like too big of a chunk for like someone to like specialize or focus on that, and then to like have someone set up the initial security scans or something automatically. It's like someone has to like do that, which isn't usually a priority at like a startup.
And you get in the position like Tom said, the first, once you get to the point where you can start it, you've just got a huge report, and where do you start with that? Right?
Yeah, then it's overloading backlog. Or if like you're about to be acquired and it's like, oh, maybe you could have like 2-factor authentication or something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
or someone picks you up, a big enough client comes in that's really going to make the quarter, but they're in an industry that requires some other type, like you said, 2-factor authentication or some different reporting requirements or auditing requirements, and all of a sudden it's a huge undertaking that in retrospect would have been nice if you were addressing all along.
Yeah.
Also the sensitivity of data too. What is the risk? Is it a massive amount of risk? These large enterprises it is, or is something more startup is not as much of a concern?
Well,
Yeah.
there's so many other reasons too. A startup might not make it. The chance of it
Yeah.
being the security finding, is probably not a big one right up until it happens and it sinks them. But so many startups get sunk for so many reasons. That's never the thing you hear about, right? Geez,
Yeah.
if only they had fixed that SQL injection issue, they'd
Yeah.
still be, they would have won the space. Sean, how about you? You got anything to add?
Hey guys, been silent for most of it, but been enjoying the conversation and the perspectives. Certainly agree with everything you guys have been talking about. I'll tell you a little bit of a fun story that relates to this. In my previous company, I was working in the Intel community, and the former CIO of the CIA had joined our cybersecurity team in our business, a guy by the name of Gus Hunt. And at the time, DevSecOps, as a 3-term acronym or whatnot, it was starting to take shape. It wasn't like pervasive yet, but everybody was trying to relegate the word DevOps to something else, OpSecDev, SecOps Dev, DevSecOps. And I was like, all of you shut up, it's DevOps, right? I was like the person pushing back against it. And so Gus was doing that to me, but there was a security guy in the Intel community that was trying to do the same thing. Now, this guy didn't know what the hell DevOps meant at all. Like, he was just a cyber guy that was really focused around compliance. And, but he was the one that would come and evaluate everything. And he would argue with me about DevSecOps versus DevOps. And when that guy looked at me like he wanted to fist fight me, and he literally said, "That's some Edward Snowden shit right there."
Wow.
I committed to incorporating sec into the middle of the term DevOps, even though we were using Fortify, we were using SonarQube, we were using all the tooling to get there in Zap. But yeah, I mean, I think it's the right way to go, and 100%. And I think that a lot of people don't understand it, and they don't have a good understanding of why you do it and get it incorporated in and automated. And it just takes education, and it takes sometimes starting slow, but getting people understanding what's there and how to move out. And I think we're seeing more customers taking it up and understanding the value and the benefit of it. So that's good. Appreciate all the conversation, guys, and thanks.
Victor, any closing thoughts if no one else has anything else?
No, I mean, I really look forward, I'll begin joining more of these meetings. I'm happy that I was able to join, and this is a pretty cool crowd. So I'll be sure to tune in more often.
Well, thank you for letting me put you on the spot. I was,
No.
you happen to
No
be
problem.
a convenient target
Yeah.
in
Yeah, all right.
to invite you in, but thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I think this has been good. It's I think most of us, not surprising, people that come to the meetups that are that are looking to learn more and kind of grow the craft tend to be a lot more receptive to, we should be doing these things, we should be looking more into it. I guess the real issue, like you said, is the culture change. How do we get the people that aren't coming to these meetups or other meetups who aren't interested in trying to get better and just want to check the boxes? How do we get them to change? And Tom said it in almost every conversation we've had in the year we've been a meetup here, which is, you got to change the incentive system, right? If you leave it the way it is, you're not going to get different results. So, all right.
I do have to say that I find that railing against marketing terms like DevSecOps versus DevOps, I used to believe that had value, but I don't believe it does anymore. DevSecOps is something different from DevOps because people believe it is, not because it really is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I actually still have slides in some of my presentations I presented, just 2 years ago that were why I hate the term DevSecOps, but it's not a valid it's not a useful fight to have.
All right, well, then, Tom, get used to me talking about DevSecOps.
Yeah, well, Max, if it takes off, I'll start using it.
All right.
Yeah,
I will say this though, Tom. I agree with you that the architecture is very meaningless when you're talking about implementation and the reality on the ground and what's happening and what you're doing and what you're building and the rigor that goes into the tools, the practices, the software. But oftentimes, we're talking to people about what they should be doing or how they should be doing it and fighting against some of the culture, and they get wrapped around the axle on some of those terms. Not that that's right or wrong, but if you try to fight them on it, you fail. Like you have to
you're right.
understand why they find value in those terms and just get past it and let them own it, and then just try to explain why what goes behind that term is what's important. So I agree that there's not a lot of value in it, but the challenge we have is when you're trying to navigate the culture of many of the decision makers and the managers and mid-level managers and stakeholders, like they get really emotionally connected to something, and it's hard to get past it sometimes.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. I find every new organization I go into, you have to figure out, you got to build a lexicon for the term, what terms mean there.
Yeah.
And they're never 100% aligned with any other organization.
To that point, Victor did say we work on the DevSecOps team, but that's not really true. We work on the DevOps team because it was important to them, to the client.
Security first.
That security come first.
Yeah, I've heard that argument that it should be DevOps because security comes first.
Yeah.
I think it should be DevSecOps Sec. It really should be throughout everything.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, you got to throw testing in there for Max somewhere too.
Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming. Thanks for the conversation. I think it went very well. And thank you, Victor, for leading the conversation, starting off. I think we have another meetup planned for February 17th, Evolving an Agile Organization, Inspiration from Biology. And looking for another presenter to do another 30-minute or so presentation for that week too. So if you guys have anything in mind or just have ideas on who I should be looking towards, what types of talks, I'd be happy to hear them. But thanks
Awesome,
all
Gene.
for coming.
Thanks for hosting.
Yes. Thank you, Gene.
Thanks.
Thanks all. Thanks, Victor. This was fun to listen to.
Yeah, pleasure. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Victor.
Thank you, Victor.
Have a good night.
All right, see you guys. Have a good night.
Thanks. Good night.